Hey everybody, what's happening? Um, I've been thinking about a whole bunch of stuff lately, and I've been doing a lot of reading, and I've been checking out some good interviews, some good podcasts, and a lot of people thinking heavy stuff. It's been great. It's been very good for my own imagination, and I realized that there are people who come here who are all about. They've got it figured out. There's a script and they know what they want to say, and sometimes they've got a script, they know what they want to say, but there's lots of editing because they guess they just kept screwing up what it was they wanted to say and couldn't read the script. Maybe, and okay, that's fine. It's okay if that's the way you want to go about it, but I love the fact that sometimes, at least in my own case, I haven't got it all worked out, and that I'm going through a working through process. I'm working it out in front of you. Since very few people are watching this, right? And I'm increasingly not caring about that, is even more reason, why not go without a net? It's even more reason to do so. I could just sort of talk it through and do my own working out in front of whoever wants to see it. Okay. You probably saw the title of this, and am I being disingenuous in the title? Not entirely, but maybe a little, because it's a complicated topic. I'm gonna dive right in. Not recently, I saw Brad Meldau getting interviewed by Rick Beato, and a note on Beato: I probably don't agree with him on everything. I'm sure there's stuff Rick Beato likes that I'm not that crazy about. And you know what? That's fine. Rick is clearly, I think Rick's sincere. I think Rick is probably a pretty good guy. Really knows his music theory. I think he's a damn good musician. All right, so he can speak on it and he can communicate it. And when he does these sort of interviews, it's not like he could really have this conversation because he knows more than enough to be able to talk to some brilliant people and get into deep stuff with them. It's great. All right. So do I love everything Rick does? Do I agree? No. But some of these conversations have been excellent. And how often do you hear, I'd never seen Meldau interviewed before. He just strikes me as a fairly, I would guess he strikes me as a fairly humble and sedate kind of cat. Certainly not one running for limelight per se or anything like that. But they hit something early on. First of all, Meldau was at the piano doing this. It was fantastic because his facility is so incredible. That he, as he's talking to you, could be playing ideas and saying, oh, well, you adjusting them and playing something. You say, so you could do it this way, you could do it that way. And for all the people who are the jazz theory police or the music theory police who think there are rules and we must stay right down Broadway. This guy was, Meldau was blowing that all out of the water because he's sitting there going, oh, this is just a choice you could make. You could choose to do this. Well, what would you call it? Well, you could call it 2 or 3 different things. Right. They become these arguments and semantics after a while. So you could go wherever you want as long as it's saying what you're trying to say. It's hopefully communicating to who you're trying to communicate to. It's getting across to them. Great. Then it's a good choice, and it's a thing it's what you were feeling, and you want to go there. Okay, great. That was great stuff. But in the middle of that, or fairly early on in the interview, I think at some point Meldau, or it might have been that Rick asked him about it. Said, "Were you a jazz snob? Did you go through a period where you were a jazz snob?" I think it was something like that, or it might have been Meldau saying, "Well, that's when I was a jazz snob." And then they got into that for a little bit. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Because Meldau was sitting there going, no, you don't want to be that, right? And this is a multi-layered thing. And that's why it gets interesting. And that's why the title may or may not be misleading. He did a very good job, I think, of explaining that when he was younger, as a younger guy, listened to all sorts of music, and increasingly it like it does with a lot of us, it grabbed him, and more. He had to get more. He was loving it so much, and he wanted to, and loving it and understanding it meant he wanted for in quotes, a better drug. He wanted something more powerful that made him think more, stretched him more, and that got him closer to more classical music, and it got him closer to more jazz music, because those kind of musics tend to be more complicated. Oh, I'm going to get myself in trouble already, because we're in a post-truth world where nothing can be affirmed, right? If you say 2 plus 2 equals 4, you've now offended all the people who want to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5. Never mind the fact that it can't and never could be 5. No, there is no objective truth. There's only, okie dokie. We run into those sort of things. And we run into that a lot. So he made the point of, as time went on, he got more and more into these more complex musics. And so anything else that wasn't that, he didn't want to deal with. And I think a lot of musicians go through that. Now that's sort of a one-dimensional way to look at music, because as time goes by, you realize that there are deeper and deeper, and you can do things, minimal things, and just things with just a few, and all the choices and all that, and you realize, okay, it doesn't necessarily, complexity by itself does not necessarily make something superior. It just makes it complex. But making believe it's not more complex than something that has 2 chords, then you have lost your mind. You can't, okay. And he was careful, very careful, in going down that road, and said basically at one point, well, but there was a tell. He sit there and go, yeah, I was very into that stuff because it's more complex. Right. That shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. It is more complex. But complexity by itself doesn't necessarily mean it's fantastic and therefore superior or anything like that. Now, I think there is good music and lousy music. I think that it's all in the eye of the beholder. You can never say that. No, I think, look, you've had critics forever. A lot of times they get it wrong, and sometimes they get it right. Same with films, frankly. I used to love film critics, especially the ones that would really lay the hammer down on awful stuff, because there was, we're so splintered now, because we each curate our own idea of what everything is. News, everything is self-curated, a result of internet, social media. And that's not good. That's why we can't agree on anything, right? We've broken apart, and it's a real problem. So I think the thing, though, that made this fascinating about the Jazz Snob, right, is, I guess, that one-dimensional quality. I was reminded of, for instance, composer, I think it goes serialist and all that sort of stuff. If you really get into all that stuff, right? And I believe this guy was in the 50s, Milton Babbitt. Milton Babbitt, as I recall, Milton Babbitt was kind of math music, that he had figured out all these mathematical ideas and associated with particular sounds and tones. And if you look into Milton Babbitt, and I remember getting into it in college, or at least checking it out, and the thing that was apparent is Milton Babbitt was probably brilliant. And equally apparent is Milton Babbitt doesn't get programmed at major concert halls, because no one likes it. Because it works as a mathematical exercise, but that doesn't necessarily make it music. Now, that's that's a little bit of an exaggeration about what we're going to be talking, what I'm trying to say about someone getting into jazz or getting into classical music and recognizing that the structures and that there's a lot going on there. People who read great novels and are reading Dostoevsky or something. I mean, if you really get into the written word and you read the great novels, there comes a point where you realize why they're so freaking great. And there's something to be said for that high level of complexity and all the things that are going on there. Here's where we get into the snob, though. And I guess that's how you want to define snob. And to me, a lot of times the snob, all right, isn't a person who really loves these things in the first place, but is a person who because they know, oh, this is high-end stuff, they want the association with it so that they can look down and condescend on other people and use this as their cudgel. This is their weapon of choice. All right? So they may not even really be into the thing. Then again, there might be people who are very, very into the thing and have decided, I have found the Holy Grail. And if that's the Holy Grail, then everything else can't be. Right? And that's the fatal mistake. When you go there, right, and again, it comes out of a need to put down other people and the need to condescend and the need to make yourself be superior. That's what makes the snob. That's the snob. Okay? But if you state that calculus and trigonometry are more advanced than basic arithmetic, you're not a snob. All you've done is state a fact. And I think and you go, but it's the arts, right? It's the arts, and you can't possibly, right? In the arts, you can't get too ticky-tack because that's, subjective and it's all our, and that is true. That's true. And should you have to be careful of it? Of course you have to be careful of it. And I think I'm trying to be somewhat careful of it now. Hell, I'm bringing it up. But that doesn't mean, it's still saying that these things are true, because they are true. These musics are more complicated. Again, doesn't necessarily make them superior. It might give them a better chance. The great works there may be utterly sublime in a way that, some other things probably aren't, that don't survive so long. So it's a difficult question, but I think the snob is the person who wants to lord it over somebody else, or has that one-dimensional thing. Complexity means better. I want to associate myself with the better. Therefore I am because of my, it's the opposite of guilt by association. It's superiority by association. Because I associate myself with this scene, therefore that's somehow glommed onto me, and now I am a better person. And that's garbage, all right? Being associated with a scene doesn't make you better. So those ideas get nuts. But are there things that could be, people hate when people sit there and use a term like something on a higher level. But we deal with it in our academic worlds and all sorts of worlds all the time. And we deal with it in our arts worlds. You don't, to get into good music schools, you still have to be a pretty darn good musician, right? At least to start. You've got to have if you get a degree from one of those great schools, you obviously got exposed to some really good stuff somewhere along the line. You probably play pretty well, or at least have the capacity to play pretty well. right? I mean, and there's tons of good players out there. I bump into them all the time. A lot of good musicians out there. But you should. I mean, it doesn't mean ever the world has to love you, but I mean, it does give you a degree of you're for real. Now we live in a overly credentialized society, especially when it comes to education, and that's the other side of that, I suppose. But I mean, there is something to be said for if you've got a musical education and you know some things. It's helpful. Now there are ear players who will blow you away. Okay, all right, and I like a mixture of both. I think of myself as I'm a product of music education in many ways, but I was always a little bit an ear player too. And so I like the mixing of both. And I think sometimes when I lean more towards that, I'm doing more creative things anyhow, because I'm just going with where you're going with where your heart and mind are taking you, instead of an analytical side that says that you have to do such and such. And that's healthy. So I wanted to tackle the Jazz Snob, because what the hell does it mean? And again, the guy out there who's they exist, and so I'm not saying they don't, but I think it's that person who thinks that being connected to such a thing automatically makes you a better person. That's a lot of crap. But at the same time, don't think that the object of their affection isn't necessarily incredible stuff, because it might be. And it might be something that's more complicated and requires more of a listener. And it does. And it's great stuff. That we have almost an over-democratization. All things, because all humans are created equal, therefore all ideas are equal, or all art is equal, or all culture is equal. It gets tough, right? Because cultures can be connected to nations or ethnicities or all sorts of things. And then that's trouble, because it can turn into all sorts of really, really, really bad things. I get that, and I agree with that. But rather than making the entire conversation verboten, it would be better to, while keeping some guardrails up, a modicum of guardrails, but not guardrails so high that you can't have a discussion. Guardrails low enough so that there still can be some cross-pollination, the free exchange of ideas, assuming that those ideas are and arguments are being made in good faith. Then you're fine. There were a couple other things I wanted to hit with you guys today. I've got a book recommendation. Really got me thinking. Now we're going to change gears here just a little bit. Brian Klaas, who's a social scientist, as I recall. You'll see him a lot. Maybe it's TED Talks or whatever. Sometimes he's asked to do political commentary. Klaas is a brilliant guy. He's just written a book called Fluke. And his thesis is essentially that we have human beings, not news, human beings want to put things into a box. They want to feel like they understand everything. And when there are things outside of the box, it gets them very, very uncomfortable. So we'll tell ourselves stories, even if they're not true, just to keep things within the box. We do this with economics. We do it in various areas. And then, because you cannot factor in everything perfectly, it's the same, right? It's about, is it over here? Chaos theory. Where's my chaos book? It's around here someplace. I know I have the chaos book. James Gleick's Chaos, Original Chaos, I know is around here someplace. Maybe I have it upstairs. Yeah, maybe I have it upstairs. Reminded me, in fact, he makes references to James Gleick's Chaos. The idea that you can't account for everything. It's the butterfly effect, right? And that is a real thing, that just when you think you've got all in control, something comes out of left field. And that unpredictability is part of, you've got to, look, you can't put it in a box. You've got to accept this idea that it is a free-for-all out there. Our ideas about we're going to order it, that's just to keep us from hyperventilating. That's all that is. What we really want to do, if we really want to be accurate and we really want to be honest with ourselves, is recognize that there are things that are going to come out of nowhere. COVID was a great example of it. No one was ready for it. No one really believed in it. I didn't, not meaning when it happened. When it happened, I was like, okay, it's a real deal. But there was some talk about it at the end of December that year. And my son saw it, and he was like, what do you think? I'm like, well, it's bad, but I ain't coming here. And then I was like, look, here's a great example. And I made a point of it to tell him, I said, I'm wrong. Dad got it wrong. Because although very rare and nearly unprecedented, the unprecedented can happen too. So even if you're playing the percentages, you go, well, you might get it wrong. We don't have a lid on all of it. And we can't have a lid on all of it. And that's the fantastic part about that book. As that book goes deeper, he eventually turns out, class disappointed me a little bit because he becomes a determinist in the end. There's no free will, everything's scripted. We just don't know the script. I think that's where he was going with this, and that's how these seemingly contradictory ideas end up working. I'm not a determinist. I'm more of a Daniel Dennett guy. Yes, I recognize that consciousness is a very complicated thing, and there probably is no singular I, and that we're not just, whoever we are is not some consciousness riding behind our eyeballs. No, I recognize there's more to it than that, and that's kind of simplified. But a great book though, and really makes you think, and it's actually a page turner. But I love these sort of things, so there you go. Also, checking out some stuff about physicists lately, and then I'll let you go. I promise. Is because I love those conversations, and the stuff with Klaus got me in sort of that direction, and started getting me towards. I was watching some people making a very good commentary on string theory, and the argument was, that we've been working on this for almost 40 years now, and it's probably untestable. And while we've been going around in epistemological circles on this, getting us nowhere, we probably could be working on actual physics. I don't think that's a terrible argument. I think string theory is fascinating, but again, if we can ever prove it, listen, I hope the last 40 years haven't been a waste of time, because there have been some brilliant people working on that stuff. But it's also, the physics world is weird because they've seemed to, we've entered a period of time where physicists, at some point we knew some of them, but now we don't know any of them. That's not just a product of media. That's a product of them, I have a feeling, loving this little gig they have where they could work on some really, really strange stuff. It's all about trying to get that funding. But I think it's a strange, incestuous sort of world, and I'm not sure they're doing it for anyone's greater good, because they gave up on that a long time ago. And so I get a little concerned about whether, CERN, concerned. Interesting. But they yeah, I'm a little. I do have my doubts about where they're going and if they're going and if they're ever going to get there, and how that, which is now the establishment, when that breaks down, how that breaks down, and what supplants it. That is something I'm curious about. And one last thing, because this all these things get a little political. I am. I always talk about the 0 to 100 scale of 0 means you're you're Benito Mussolini, and 100 means you're, I don't know, so liberal you've fallen off a cliff, and okay, and that's 100, and the other one, and score myself around an 80, because I do feel that if you keep going any more left of me, it starts to get a little weird, and I consider myself left of Democrats, and yet I'm not a communist. No, no, don't get me started on that. I'm not. I remember that, or whatever that was, and it wasn't very good. So no, but I occasionally will check out. In the past, I've checked out guys like Sam Harris, for instance, and Harris frustrates me sometimes, a lot of times, because Sam is ostensibly a liberal, but the liberals hate him because he won't talk dogma. I'm not sure that's a knock on Sam or that's a knock on democratic dogma. They don't want to have the conversation. There's, the non-truth world or post-truth world, the worst of it has come from the right, and it's been okay. But there's you're going to find some of it on the far out on the left either, where you can't say this and you can't say that, and there are all sorts of things we can't say, and so you're no longer able to have a free exchange idea and have discussion. That's a problem. I like Harris ostensibly, but sometimes, boy, for a liberal, he sure does hang with a lot of conservatives who I don't agree with, and his views sometimes just get too paranoid, just too paranoid, too quick to go for that, but he's obviously very bright, has a good. He's capable of having a good conversation, but always seems to go that way. And there's a number of them, whether it's Lex Friedman, who I do not trust, or Eric Weinstein, who's a brilliant guy, and then, God, he's paranoid. What a waste, because there's so much intellect there, and he's just convinced everyone's out to get him, and he's just paranoid. He's liable to believe all sorts of crazy things. They all go hang out with Rogan, which, Jesus, is a non-starter. So even though I like to think of myself as, I like smart people and I like people who are asking questions, and some of those people certainly doing it, they all turn into Jordan Peterson, fall off the cliff. Now, I shouldn't say that with Harris, because Harris and Peterson hate each other. But those guys are not the answer, and I'm highly suspicious of them. As something there that I just sit there every time I deal with those guys and just go, something ain't right there. Harris would probably be my more or less favorite of them, because I think he is, but again, there's a paranoia there. He never got over the thing with Affleck. That turned them, boy. Not that Affleck was right, Affleck was wrong. Anyway, these are the things, these are the thoughts that are running through the torturous meshes of my mind. So, yeah, there's a conversation to be had, though, about the Jazz Snob. Because if you love jazz and you sit there and you love classical music, say, and you sit there and go, this is the most amazing stuff in the world, and this is simply a higher level of music, I don't disagree with you. It doesn't always mean it's the greatest art, but there's no doubt that there's more going on there. And that's a controversial opinion. But I don't think that doesn't make you the Jazz Snob. Putting down everybody else, or wanting to be associated so you could put it down, then you're a Jazz Snob, you're a creep. You're just a snob. Yeah. Oh, one last thing. Then I'm going to let you go. But there's a lot of people quitting YouTube. Have you seen that one lately? Folks, I'm done. I'm out. I'm burned out. And I've been watching this, And right, and one of the reasons I found it interesting is these guys have these enormous numbers, incredible amount of people watching them, right? They've become very influential. Great, God bless. And they're unhappy with the state of affairs. Because it turns out what they really wanted all along is they wanted the approbation or the acceptance of legacy media. Guys doing film here wanted to get a Hollywood gig. Guys doing commentary here wanted to get hired, I guess, by news organizations. It's a lot of that. So they weren't here to be, ooh, we're rebels, right? And I just want to say what I want to say. No, what they really wanted is they wanted to turn this into something they could turn into a business. Kind of disappointing. You know? Kind of disappointing. So listen, I am all for people making a living and making some bread. But man, if you're successful here, but geez, it didn't make me the money, or it didn't. So that's why we were doing this. Because I have no hopes of this going anywhere. I'm doing it just to do it. I'm doing it because I think I'm doing it because I like getting it off my chest. I think it's healthy. Someone might see it and get something out of it. But that's it. And it goes back to the Brian Klaas thing. The whole shoot match is absolutely crazy. You know, thinking you're going to handicap it. You're not going to handicap anything. So in such a situation, what do? You do exactly what you want. You're not doing it to parlay it into something. You're like, I need these steps and then I'm going to get what I want. You can have what you want now. If it's doing the thing. You know, I do music. I don't do music to make money. I don't have any choice. And musicians have said this forever. They do it for free because they just love it so much. They've been taken advantage of forever. Artists have been forever, but it's the right reason to be doing it. You know, do something you love, and if it finds a commercial application, well, hey, listen, who doesn't want a gig? I like making a buck, same as the next guy. Right? Totally cool with it. Right? I'm a capitalist. I like making money. No problem with that. But, I'm doing this to do something. No, just do the thing that you like to do. And without concern about it has to have some tremendous commercial viability. So, you have some thoughts on Jazz Snobs? And again, I don't like the Jazz Snob. I really don't, in the sense that this is this person, right? But I'll be damned if someone sits there and go, you know, if you sit there and go, no, all of this art and all of this music, it's all identical. Because we're going to democratize everything. Because we cannot make a value judgment. Making a value judgment by itself is an act of, I don't know, putting someone down or do. Okay, I think we have values and we have to make value judgments. We do it all the time anyway. Trying to make believe finding that there's an evil to all of that. Okay, so feel the need to subscribe, man. I need you cats. Feel the need to give me a like. And you have some thoughts on it? I'm all ears. I'm not gonna fight with you. I'm really not. Plenty of people have plenty of ideas on these sort of subjects. So if you have something you want to say, please, love to hear from y'all. All right, guys, you all take care. I'll catch you another week or whatever it's gonna be. Peace.